Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them. On the 20th of November 2003, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011, he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know. Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.
A very, very good evening, Thursday, the 23rd of October 2025. My name is Raj Emir. This is one of those recusant 9 transmissions that we've somehow managed to continue over the years. Been an interesting journey. The content this evening is in 2 parts. It will be short. It's late. My daughter's in bed. I've got a friend visiting, and I've just told them both to turn off the one definitely to go to sleep. The other one to turn off the internet because my connection wasn't great. But it's now saying excellent connection, so hopefully we'll be able to power through this evening. I've had this for some time. The first part I've had for some time. I've not wanted to do anything with it because I try my best to respect survivors. Simple as that. A lot of them are damaged. I've worked with a lot of them and damaged, and I use that word intentionally. A lot of them are damaged, and who blames them with what they've had to endure in whatever form of child abuse they've endured. It doesn't just have to be the grooming gangs. So I try my best to tread lightly and be as kind as possible. And this is even after I've endured some nonsense. So I've resisted putting this out until now, and I'm going to put it out now for one reason and one reason alone. Samantha Walker Roberts, I think her surname is, has presented herself forward, put herself forward, first of all I saw her on GB News this morning, and more recently I read her in an article on the BBC. So I'm sorry, Sam, I know you're here. And I know you'll start crying and go to your Pakistani mates or whoever. But you've presented yourself into this space. And I think it's time I shared some truths. Don't you? For those of you who are new to me, I've been at this for 7 years now. And to my friends in Greater Manchester Police and elsewhere who are watching, just name the place, lads. You've tried multiple times to put me in prison, and every time you've been caught out lying and you've failed, haven't you? Same with the Labour Party. Tried to sue me. What happened? I'm still waiting to hear back from you. They've not even given me the decency of a response, by the way. I told them I'll see them in the High Court about a year ago when they tried to censor me. Not even the decency of a response. So, I am... No, it's not something I want to do, but it's something I have to do. Let me put my headphones on as well. Let me get this working, would be helpful. Video source, there you go.
Why do you still have faith in Jess Phillips?
Hold on, let's start it from the beginning.
Good morning. Good morning. We've seen 4 survivors who just don't feel they can continue to be part of it. Why do you want to stay within there? Why do you still have faith in Jess Phillips, the safeguarding minister?
Jess has only been honest from the start. She's told us what she's been able to tell us at every stage. And I feel like she's been true to her word, and I do be concerned regarding her because of the narrative that they're pushing and for her safety. It's becoming a bit of a witch hunt against her.
The other members of the panel who've gone, the four of them, have said that they loathed the way that they were treated by the panel. The words that they used in interviews here with us this week were patronised, gaslit and manipulated. Have you experienced anything like that?
No, none at all. It's been completely survivor-led with 100% safeguarding and anonymity. They've given us a lot of protection and a lot of one-to-one support if needed. It's been fantastic.
Is it?
So,
go on.
You spoke to our researchers, I believe, and you said that in a way some survivors can't see beyond their trauma, which is very understandable. But what do you mean by that in terms of this?
They're coming from a place of trauma and they're trying to find evidence regarding race and ethnicity, but this isn't about that. This is about rape as a whole by abusers, whether they're black, white or pink, and they're pushing for a certain narrative due to the trauma. And many survivors like myself, and I'm speaking up on behalf of a lot of survivors, because they're feeling too scared to come forward due to the toxicity and bullying from other girls. And this is what the problem is. That's the narrative that they're pushing. And this national inquiry has been worded since 2020 as a CSE national inquiry, and it needs to stay like that because there's many survivors that deserve to be part of this.
What they're saying is that they feel that in widening the inquiry, it will lose its focus on the racial and religious aspect to it. What was found by Baroness Casey, which was, we know, that a disproportionate amount of Asian, Muslim, Pakistani men were involved in this abuse, in this gang abuse. But you feel that you can do that, and you can look at other aspects of sexual abuse.
Yeah, because if this national inquiry comes down to purely the statistics and the racial aspect, then that's showing that the reasoning behind it all is racially motive. This national inquiry needs to be about the victims and survivors of all types of abuse within TSA.
Good morning. Good morning.
Her husband was a lovely man called Stephen. A friend of mine committed suicide. Stephen, who I didn't know at the time, came to me and asked me for help when I was campaigning for the public inquiry in my own town, and said, this is my wife and this is what happened to her. And what had happened to her was she'd gone to the police station. She'd been sexually assaulted or something when she was a child. She'd gone to the police station. The police officer couldn't be bothered behind the counter, handed her over to a couple of Asian men, I think they were Bangladeshi men, I'm not sure, who took her away. So that's the police officer handed her over. Raped her in the car. She was walking down the street in distress. Someone else picked her up, took her to her house, raped her and raped her again. I think she suffered 7 rapes in that night. Horrific, 100%. And he'd been trying to fight for justice and got nowhere. And I worked with Stephen. We manipulated the game. You know, we played the game. We knew what we were doing. Stephen was very bright. He worked in some sort of surveillance industry, high-level government sort of surveillance industry. And we managed to break through and get her story told in its entirety in Andy Burnham's assurance review and a whole host of failings. And there's more failings, actually, as well, that involved Jim McMahon and a few others, including the Home Affairs Select Committee who wrote to my council, exposed all of it. She then, for whatever, and so she isn't a victim of a traditional grooming gang, and I'll go into that in a moment. They had marital issues from what I could work out. She left, he committed suicide. And then at some point during that, she started hanging out with Pakistani men. And there's a woman who I spoke at a conference, at a rally with last week before, in Rochdale. We don't always get on. We've not seen eye to eye for a while. She picked a side. Her name's Debbie Barrett-Gall. Did a lot of work in Oldham for credit where credit's due. And she presented herself as Samantha's mother for a while. Went on GB News as her mother. And from the outset, my voice isn't welcome. My analytical skills isn't welcome in this space. And And I use the word brutal, but I don't mean it as though I'm brutal. I'm just very focused and very relentless and very, very clear on why I'm here, what I hope to achieve, and where I'll go once I'm done. So we're all clear. There's a park bench, hopefully, with a flask of tea, and I'll happily stack shelves in Aldi. I'm not, I have nothing left I want, if that makes any sense to any of you. What she did was the Pakistani she was rolling with and her conspired with each other, and they found some other girls, and so these lads who found these other girls and recruited Samantha to coach them on what grooming and being raped and stuff would be like, so they could make an allegation that I'd done it. To her credit, Debbie Barrett Cole intervened, and that was the end of that. And I think that's how messed up she is. And again, I'm not, you can see just by the way I'm behaving here, I'm not shouting or screaming or anything like that. So she has associations in Oldham with a whole host of individuals that I don't necessarily think are in her best interests, and are continuing to manipulate and use her and exploit her. And that's my perspective on looking at it from the outside in. When a survivor so I'm just reading what some of you are saying. When a survivor who isn't from the grooming gang scandal becomes the public face defending Jess Phillips, the question isn't about her sincerity. It's about who put her there and why. As you can see, Samantha Walker Roberts, out of nowhere, is now being presented as the new face of survivor support for Jess Phillips. A story just doesn't add up. Samantha's from Oldham, and you've seen her defending her, but Samantha's from Oldham, which is the town where Jess Phillips personally refused to back a public inquiry into the grooming gang scandal. Only October? We'd fought for 6 years. Samantha had seen that. She'd sat in the public gallery year after year. And she's now defending Jess Phillips, who had personally refused to back a public inquiry into the town. She knows that the so-called inquiry now being rolled out with Tom Crowther, remember Oldham's meant to have one of these local inquiries, has no statutory powers. Actually, what's taking place is unlawful. The council wrote to the government, said we want a national inquiry with statutory powers. But Arooj Shah and the Labour Party associates worked with the Labour government and are now working with Tom Crowther, who knows better, to try and implement a local inquiry with no statutory powers. Even though the government has committed to a national inquiry with statutory powers. With local inquiries, how can you have the local inquiries not have statutory powers? She knows all this. She knows a local inquiry without statutory powers cannot compel evidence, cannot summon witnesses, and can never hold anyone to account. Yet her endorsement is being used by the BBC to give the illusion of survivor unity, to suggest the process has legitimacy because a victim from Oldham with her small team, I think of survivors who also are like her, not survivors of the grooming gangs, say Jess Phillips should stay. To complement this interview this morning, there's a BBC News report where Samantha Roberts, I call them the Phillips Five, I mentioned her, they wrote a letter, I think to Keir Starmer. Jess Phillips has remained impartial to the process, only listening to feedback, and we want her to remain in position for the duration of the process for consistency. I know Samantha, she is not capable of constructing that sentence. She is not capable of constructing that sentence. In this letter, they go further. It's insisting that Phillips's previous experience and drive to reduce violence against women and girls, and her clear passion and commitment is important to us. They praise her as someone who has devoted her life to hearing and amplifying the voices of women and girls who would otherwise have been unheard. Okay. Those words carry emotional weight, of course, but they also serve a political process. They transform a question of accountability into one of personal trust. They ask you, me, the public, to see Jess Phillips not as the MP who blocked a public inquiry in Oldham, who stood up in Parliament and said, no, we don't need one, who then came up with this nonsense, or helped come up with this nonsense of 5 local inquiries without statutory powers until an educated public held her to account. No. She blocked and did so much more. But it's okay. She's the tireless champion of women's safety. Yet, the nation's women, the what? 100,000 is the conservative estimate, victims of the systematic rape and institutional betrayal that are specific to these crimes, specific to the racial motivation, religious justification. All of them are to remain without justice if Samantha Walker-Jones gets her way. The council, the police and the political leadership will face no legal reckoning. The inquiry survivors were promised a statutory investigation specific to the grooming gangs. This is nothing, and you can see she's openly advocating for it not to be this. It's an administrative process with no power to compel evidence, no power to summon witnesses, and no power to hold anyone to account. And that's what's happening in her own town with the inquiry that's underway. And she, after 7 years of all of us campaigning, her husband committing suicide during the process, she's fronting this shit. Sorry, Samantha Roberts, yeah. What is being raised here for for me is a far deeper question. How did Samantha Walker Roberts, a victim from Oldham, but not of the grooming gangs, end up on a survivors panel for grooming gang victims? How did other women from other parts of the country, not victims of the grooming gangs, end up on a survivors panel for the grooming gangs? That single question reveals how deep this manipulation runs. And you saw it there. Do you think she just rocked up on GB News? Do you think she just rocked up on BBC saying with this letter written to Keir Starmer and it makes all the headlines? Do you think that just happened accidentally? This is the establishment fighting back. This is Jess Phillips hiding behind survivors of child sexual exploitation. How did Samantha and others like her come to speak on behalf of those whose trauma comes not from generic child sexual exploitation? And I'm not belittling it at all before anyone makes any allegations, but from years of organised child sexual exploitation by Pakistani rape gangs and the systematic cover-ups that allowed it to happen and continue. Now, according to several accounts, some members of the survivors panel are arguing the inquiry's remit, as you can see, should not focus on the grooming gangs. Think about that. A survivors panel formed in response to national outrage over grooming gangs is now steering the process away from investigating grooming gangs, and the people being quoted as the moral authority for this shift are not themselves victims of that crime pattern. Who decided this? Who selected them? Who authorised their placement on the panel? Was it the Labour Party, desperate to contain political damage by installing safer, more manageable voices? Was it Jess Phillips herself? Samantha's talking now in the first person about Jess Phillips and her liaisons with her. I thought Jess Phillips was independent. You heard her. This is an independent process. There's a panel. I'm not there. There's a charity appointed. So is she bypassing the charity and speaking to her chosen few? Making sure that they're doing the jobs that they're meant to be doing to make sure this doesn't go where it needs to go. I'll tell you right now, if I've worked in a space where I've brought in an independent intermediary, then I cannot bypass that independent intermediary and speak to the survivors. Jess Phillips, her political future depends on reframing the scandal away from institutional failure and towards a preferred language of violence against women and girls. It's men, isn't it? Well, no, Jess, it's not men. It's a specific type of man or men. What she wants is, and you can see with Samantha being manipulated and played or whatever, is they're moving or wanting a broad bureaucratic umbrella that conveniently buries the grooming gang issue beneath layers of policy jargon and such a wide remit where it's to do with all forms of CSE. Whatever the answer to the questions I'm asking, one fact is clear. I don't know. I don't care what Samantha said in that interview just there. This is not a survivor-led process. It is a politically managed one. By platforming Samantha Walker Roberts' praise of Phillips into a story of survivor loyalty. Jess Phillips lied 2 days ago. Fiona Goddard released the evidence that showed Jess Phillips lied in Parliament, lied to the Home Affairs Select Committee, and the evidence was there. What are you going to do, Phillips? Sue me? You're a liar. You lied. She should be hauled back to the Home Affairs Select Committee with Fiona Goddard's evidence to say, you told us this, now look at this. What is happening here reframes a collapse of public trust as a dispute between victims rather than an act of political control. And for those of us who've been on this journey for so long, it's a playbook we have seen before. Powerful institutions exploiting individuals to project compassion, suppress scrutiny, sow division. We've seen it so many times. We've seen it so many times. Victims were promised justice. They were told the truth would finally come out. One of them's here, Ellie's here. Instead, they're watching history repeat itself. A government-backed process, stripped of power, fronted by respectable names, and defended by people who know full well that without a focus on the racially motivated and religiously justified crimes subsequently covered up at the altar of multiculturalism and maintaining community relations, all in exchange for a bloc vote controlled by Pakistani clans and Islamists, this inquiry cannot deliver anything close to accountability. This is about race. This is about ethnicity. This is about religion. Samantha Walker Roberts may well believe in Jess Phillips' sincerity, despite everything that Jess Phillips has done in Oldham to try and prevent an inquiry. She may genuinely admire her, I don't know. But sincerity doesn't equal justice, and the elevation of her voice over those who have lived the nightmare of the grooming gang abuse isn't a coincidence. It is a strategy. If the government truly wanted an inquiry led by survivors, involving survivors, it would start by listening to the right ones, the ones who have been victims of this specific crime. It wouldn't stack a panel with victims of other forms of abuse and then call it representative. It wouldn't sideline those who have spent years fighting for the truth about grooming gangs in towns like mine and yours and do what they are doing now. And I have another video to show for you. Just give me 1 second. Louise, my connection is saying excellent connection at my end, so I'm not sure if it's anything I'm doing. Nigel Farage in January said he will reform, we're going to commission one. Come on, mate. And the national inquiry is the tool we have right now. I've had another video and you say, Raja, Samantha's motives. If any of your friends on Samantha on Facebook, you'll have seen what her friends list looks like. I was going to bring it up, but I don't want to. Hi, Jamie Lee. How are you? Jamie Lee is another brave young woman. And Jamie Lee will tell you. She's been pushing me to do something on this for some time. She's, and others. And I didn't want to get involved. But Samantha has now stepped forward to defend a political process. Politicians. And this is why I am doing what I'm doing now. I've got a video to play for you. It destroys Samantha. It destroys her. If you're finding value, please like, subscribe, at least to this YouTube channel. It's free. Takes you 2 seconds to click something. If that, buy me a cheap super chat if you can, like these lovely people are doing. Or preferably, please, sign up to Red Wall and the Rabble. Our numbers are extremely modest at a push. That's the link, redwallandrabble.co.uk. Or buy me a coffee if you are feeling you can support me with £3. Well, don't follow the thread. Here. Thank you, Joanna.
Would have to one warrior woman. It would have to,
I'm assuming though. I'm assuming though.
One second. Consider was talking.
Right.
Go on, Consider.
You can't. But warrior, I'm just academically. We would have. One would have to do it group and then do a separate one for singles, right?
Yeah.
They don't have enough police force to attack every single individual. Unfortunately,
They've literally worded it on the paperwork saying group-based only, dedicated to this whole national
Samantha
inquiry.
talking.
yeah, I understand
You
how
can see
that
her name
can be
flash up, top left.
disappointing, and I agree with you. But at the same time, you have to understand they'd have to go to every single individual, and it would take a lot of time and also a lot of police effort, which I know they're notoriously not famous for doing. But yeah,
What do you mean?
It's not surprising to me.
The police aren't involved in the inquiry.
Yeah, it's got nothing to do with the police.
You just said it.
It's a matter of getting all the paperwork, gathering and reading through it. which can take years because it's going to be thousands of pages.
Yeah, but I'm assuming if you're going to accost the person who's actually done said crime, you need to have law enforcement involved now. Otherwise, nothing happens.
That's not what this report is about. I think like from like Consider just said, from kind of like a statistical kind of thing, they would have to do like these group-based analysis and stuff first. Have they said to you though that like they're not going to look at anybody else? Like, is that a complete
yeah, it's the framework from the government. Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
That's a quick one, Warrior. I just wanted to mention, look, I am not here to blame anybody, and I'm not here for a minute to prove that what that female said was wrong. What I'm trying to gather here is obviously how come there were so many people were allowed on the panel, on the stage before her, and as soon as she came up and she was dropped. Now, the guy who I'm coming here is, we're going to ask him these questions. So if you stick around, it should be here around 9:30 to 10. I'm only going to have few people on the panel. I'm not going to have full panel, and I'm not going to allow everybody to jump on the panel. However, if you have a question for that person, you can ask in a comment, and we will try to ask that question for you, or we will invite you for 1 minute and ask that question. But remember that, guys, I'm not doing this to disrespect or insult that female. I'm only doing this to find out what is behind this, because a lot of people are calling this as a demonstration, right? Agree? That's what they're calling on it.
I mean, the answer is... I don't
Hang
want to say
on
simple,
one second. I just want to address Samantha, like her voice matters to me more. I've given you a follow, Samantha. Can you... can we have a chat about, there's a lot to unpack in that, and I'm seriously really interested in that, but it's obviously a lot to unpack on a live. I have heard what you've said.
I'm just trying to get it shared out there, because the consultation is starting next week, and the charity, the NWG, can alter what the government have set as framework, but yet the government aren't responding to this concern, and I'm arguing that I don't fit this narrative. So they need to either tell me I'm silenced or allow it for other CSE victims to be part of it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've given you a follow. Yeah, please, can we kind of correspond about it? Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for coming up and, highlighting that. And
thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry that you have had to deal with that.
I'm thinking of the bigger picture, and the statistics that will come out of this will just feed the reform and Tommy Robinson, and we don't want that. It needs to be equal and fair, and it was.
She is thinking of the bigger picture. Those are her in words. And what is coming out will feed Tommy Robinson and feed reform, and we don't want that. She is thinking of the bigger picture, and the bigger picture is to hide the racial and religious features of these grooming gangs. That is not the language of a survivor. That is the language of a Labour Party political activist. A Labour Party political activist, I don't know if she's a member of the Labour Party, I have no idea, who is the language of a political activist. Her politics mean more. Thank you, Stephanie. She's there, and this is a TikTok video. It's a public video, so the recording's from a public place. It's nothing I've done unlawfully or illegally. I've had it for a while. I've not wanted to run with it. Because my belief was, as Samantha's belief is, at the beginning when she talks in there, that the framework from government had been set. Now you can clearly see that there were those in government, or at least in that NWG group, and I think it's Saber Kaiser, who are trying to nudge it to be widened to take away from the racial and religious features, and that's what Fiona Goddard, Ellie Reynolds, a few of the others have seemed to have come out and said. And then the government put in that panel a group of generic survivors, wider survivors, including activists like Samantha, who in her personal life spend considerable time with some of the Pakistani guys. I'm not sure on the accuracy of this. It's something I've heard repeatedly, and it's only for her to say or not. She'd converted to Islam or reverted to Islam, whatever. I'm not using the word reverted, converted to Islam, and now spends time with the pro-Palestinian sort of stuff. And now she wants to widen the remit of the inquiry. Not, as she claimed in the GB News interview she gave this morning, where she said this isn't about race or ethnicity, in terms of, we want it wider because it isn't just about race or ethnicity. We want to include all sorts of children. I would, as well as not, irrespective of me not being happy with that, as a victim of CSE, I can see why so many survivors of CFC who don't fit this specific remit would be thinking, this is an opportunity, we need to broaden it so our stories are told. It's not something I would agree with, but I would understand and have sympathy for that perspective. What we've got here is someone, in her own words, who wants us to see the bigger picture. And that's about not giving ammunition to reform or credibility to reform or Tommy Robinson and his supporters. Listen again. I'll just play the last bit.
To deal with that.
I'm thinking of the bigger picture, and the statistics that will come out of this will just feed the reform and Tommy Robinson, and we don't want that.
Yeah.
It needs to be equal and fair, and it was.
The statistics that will come out of this, or the evidence that will come out of this, will demonstrate how what? Predominantly Pakistani, occasionally Bangladeshi, almost exclusively Muslim, adding a whole host of asylum seekers and new wave immigrants now that Baroness Casey herself makes reference to. Maggie Oliver talks about Muslim. Maggie Oliver, she's not a racist, she's not an extremist, she shied away from all of that. We've got to see the bigger picture. So the point I'm making here is that the campaign lead for Jess Phillips has been outed as someone who is not here for the survivors of the grooming gangs, never mind the survivors of CSE. She is here to help manage the optics and the bigger picture and keep the statistics hidden. And that's not me saying it, that's from her own words. My name is Raj Emir. 7 years I have been doing this. 7 years. And yes, it has nearly killed me. If you're finding value in my work, please, please, please support me. I am. I think if you watched the transmission I put out the other day, I'm not liked in this space. I'm not here to build a think tank or this or that or something else. I'm just here to complete a task I took on because an old man asked me to. His name was Warren Bates. He handed me over a whole host of files in an Aldi bag. And in between all of that, I looked at him. He was a man from my town. His eyes were piercing, sparkling. And I'll be honest with you, I considered saying no. And part of every day I still ask myself, why did I not say no? The police phoned me today. They found a perpetrator of a crime against me, a criminal. Committed horrific acts against me and my family. Caught him red-handed. Refused to charge him, let him go. Every day. Every day. I get up at 5 in the morning, not to pray or anything like that. I get up at 5 in the morning to look out the window and see the daybreak. Because I know every day these people are trying to kill me. And the police have been protecting them for years, and the reason why is because of this. And because of what I do and the way I do it. And I'm going to do something else now. Sam Walker is out of the way. Now watch what I do to Jess Phillips and Keir Starmer. Again fully evidenced. Again fully evidenced. I'm just going to get myself a Vimto. Maybe you get yourself a drink. I want to check on my daughter to make sure she's asleep. And I will come back. Thank you very, very much to the one new sign-up on Redwall and the Rabble, and the 2 people who bought me coffees, and of course those of you who've contributed with this super chat. I just had a check to say, okay, Raja, we've just done something pretty amazing. Maybe we've had a few sign-ups. One person. I'm going to play another video for you. It's from PMQs. You'll have seen it, but I need to play it with you. It's 12 minutes. It's just the exchange between Kemi Badenoch and Keir Starmer, but it's important to scene set, and let me do what I do.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, can I pay tribute to the former Conservative MP Oliver Colville, who has very sadly passed away after a long illness. Colleagues will remember him for his love of cricket and, of course, hedgehogs. He will be very much missed. Mr. Speaker, 4 victims on the Rape Gang Survivors panel have resigned. And they've resigned because they've lost all confidence in the government's inquiry. So I'm giving my first question to one of them, to Fiona. She said, being dismissed and contradicted by a minister when you're telling the truth takes you right back to that feeling of not being believed all over again. Fiona's question is simple. What's the point in speaking up if we're just going to be called liars?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank her for raising that on behalf of Fiona, and let me give Fiona and the House my answer, Mr. Speaker, because the grooming scandal was one of the worst scandals of our time. Women and girls were abused and exploited by predatory gangs of men, and survivors have been ignored for many years, including by the state that, of course, is supposed to protect them. My vow to Fiona and them is that this national inquiry will change that. I do acknowledge that in recent days some members, including Fiona, have decided to step away from the panel. I say this, Mr. Speaker, should they wish to return, the door will always be open. But even if they do not, we owe it to them and to Fiona and to the country to answer the concerns that they have raised. The inquiry is not and will never be watered down. Its scope will not change. It will examine the ethnicity and religion of the offenders, and we will find the right person to chair the inquiry. I can tell the House today, Mr. Speaker, that Dame Louise Casey will now support the work of the inquiry, and it will get to the truth. Injustice will have no place to hide.
Mr. Speaker, I doubt she'll be satisfied with that answer. He says that they could return to the panel if they wish to. Why would they do that? The government has been engaged in a briefing war against survivors. Elizabeth. Oh, really? They say shame? Why don't they listen to what Elizabeth had to say? Why don't they listen to what Elizabeth had to say? Elizabeth, who was abused in Rotherham from the age of 14, had this to say, and I quote, "The government has created a toxic environment for survivors." They were looking for answers from the Prime Minister, and what they've heard is Labour MPs saying shame at their words. Yesterday, Mr. Speaker, the Safeguarding Minister said Elizabeth was wrong. Who should we believe? The Prime Minister's Safeguarding Minister or Elizabeth?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, let me put on record my respect for all of the survivors who've been through the most awful ordeals. And I want to thank those that have been involved so far for the work in the process. What we're trying to do is to get this right and have an inquiry with survivors at the heart. As the Safeguarding Minister told the House yesterday, that's obviously not easy. They've all come with difficult experiences. There are a wide range of views, understandably, and every survivor does bring their own painful experience to this. The survivors met the prospective chairs this week, and we want to have them to have the chance to engage. I want survivors to be at the heart of this. I want an inquiry that can get to the truth. These are the hard yards, I accept that. but I want to press on and get this right.
Mr. Speaker, he says that he wants survivors to be at the heart of this, but in his first PMQs this year, he said we did not need a national inquiry. And when he did, all of these MPs cheered. They were nodding their heads, including the safeguarding minister. They voted against the national inquiry 3 times. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. They voted against the national inquiry. They voted against the national inquiry 3 times, so the victims don't believe them. They can say no as much as they like. It is on the record. They don't like it, but it's true. Now, one of the victims has quit. Contrary to what the Prime Minister's just said and what the Home Secretary wrote this morning, they believe that the inquiry will downplay the racial and religious motivations behind their abuse. Aren't the victims right when they call it a cover-up?
Prime Minister.
Well, let me reassure the victims and the House that the scope of the inquiry will not be diluted and we won't shy away from cultural or religious issues. And Mr. Speaker, it was me that commissioned Baroness Casey in the first place, who gave me her recommendation in relation to a national inquiry, and we have, in the 4 months since then, finalised the panel and trying to get the leadership of this inquiry right with survivors at the heart. Mr. Speaker, in that period, we have also reopened 1,200 historic closed cases. I have long argued, Mr. Speaker, that the criminal route where it can be pursued is the right route for perpetrators. We've introduced mandatory reporting of child sex abuse. I happen to think that is a vital safeguard. I've been campaigning for that for over a decade. I asked the last government to introduce it, and that fell on deaf ears. And that mandatory reporting of child sex abuse is something each and every one of them voted against earlier this year. And we've given victims and survivors the power to seek an independent review of their cases. But, Mr. Speaker, in relation to this inquiry, I want to go as fast as we can to get the justice that is deserved. I want to ensure survivors are involved in that, and we're balancing the two to get this right, and I'll continue to do so.
Mr. Speaker, he's talking about mandatory reporting. I will remind him what Fiona asked. What is the point if the victims aren't going to be believed? What would be the point of mandatory reporting? All of this is happening now. All he's saying is because 4 of those victims resigned from the survivors panel. If they hadn't done that, they would have continued with the watering down, which we all know that they were carrying out. So, yes, the victims are right to be worried. He also talked about looking for a chair. It has been 10 months since we first called for a national inquiry. 10 months. It is shocking that they still do not have a chair. One of the final 2 candidates, Mr. Speaker, has pulled out, leaving a former police officer that the victims don't want. What they do want is a judge. They deserve a judge. So, Mr. Speaker, we are talking now. We are talking about the industrial-scale rape of women and girls. Unlike most of the inquiries going on, why is it that this inquiry doesn't deserve a judge?
Prime Minister.
Can I answer that? It's a serious point, Mr. Speaker, because whether it should be judge-led was looked at by Louise Casey, and she decided against that for a reason, and her reasons were twofold. I'll spell them out. The first was the speed with which we could do this. And it would have been... They asked the question, and the first was the speed with which we could do this. The second is really important, and that is that at the same time as the inquiry, I was absolutely determined that criminal investigations would go on at the same time. One of the problems that judge-led inquiries run into, I've seen and experienced this myself, is that they're often held back until the end of the criminal investigations. And I was determined that we'd be able to run the two together. And it's because of that, Mr. Speaker, that we've been able to reopen 1,200 historic cases at the same time. And, Mr. Speaker, she asks, what's the point of mandatory reporting that she voted against? I don't think she understands how it works. This, Mr. Speaker, This, Mr. Speaker, is mandatory reporting of those that have had allegations made to them, and there's clear enough evidence they've then not passed that on. That is a fundamental problem in the system. That is why we've changed the law. They should hang their heads in shame for having voted against that vital protection.
What he should hang his head in shame in is calling this a far-right bandwagon when we first raised this issue. The deputy leader, the future deputy leader, we all know who's going to win, called this a dog whistle. What we need to think about right now, Mr. Speaker, is the victims. It is the survivors. I spoke to one of them yesterday. Let's remember, these are victims who waived their anonymity, an incredibly difficult thing to do. And they believe that the safeguarding minister has lied to them and about them. One of the survivors has said, and I quote, "Jess Phillips needs to be removed because I don't think her conduct during this has been acceptable for the position that she holds." That is, those aren't my words. Those are the words of a survivor. It is a shame that Labour MPs are drowning that out. The member for Birmingham Yardley has clearly lost the confidence of the victims. Does she still have the confidence of the Prime Minister?
Can I just say, Prime Minister, even if we are quoting somebody else, we shouldn't quote it because it's a direct allegation against a member of this House. So I'm sure that that's not what was intended, Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I respect the views of all the survivors, and there are different views. I accept that. But the safeguarding minister, I think, has probably more experience than any other person in this House in dealing with violence against women and girls. Alongside her will be Louise Casey. These two individuals, Mr. Speaker, have spent decades standing up for those who've been abused and sexually exploited. And I absolutely think they're the right people to take this forward.
Mr. Speaker, she doesn't have more experience than the survivors. The fact is, just a few weeks ago, he was standing there telling us he had full confidence in the best friend of a convicted paedophile. So it is no surprise that people have no confidence in what he is saying. The victims have said that she should be sacked. We on this side of the House believe that she should be sacked because this is about Labour failure. Labour never wanted this inquiry. We demanded it. It has been Labour-run councils, Trafford, Bradford, Blackpool, that tried to suppress the truth. It is Labour ministers attacking the victims. We're standing up for them. And how is it, Mr. Speaker, how is it that whether it is rape or Chinese espionage, when he's in a position to do something about it, it's always someone else's fault?
Well, Mr. Speaker, my priorities are listening to and standing up for the survivors. That's why we're doing the work on the inquiry. That's why we've reopened the criminal cases, why we brought in mandatory reporting. But I would gently remind them they had 14 years in office. They barely mentioned this issue. And where there were inquiries, they failed to act on them. We have done more in the time we've been in office than they did in 14 long years.
I wanted to play that. So you get your frame of mind into this space. Mate, I can see you posting all the time about things being censored or blocked. It's not me. You posting about it isn't going to make any difference. It's not me. It's just me here and a computer there, so I'm not doing anything. Very early on in that exchange, the Prime Minister says the scope will not change. You heard him. Yet here we have a survivor, as in, join linking the two. Here we have a survivor in Samantha and her team who are backing Jess Phillips. They're backing her because they want the scope to change. I'm sure that's not got missed on any of you. So you didn't hear me sniffing my nose. I heard this at the time and I sat back and waited I thought, no, Raja, sit back, wait. Maybe GB News will pick up on it, maybe the Telegraph, the Spectator, maybe those people who are journalists and have teams and all of that, you know, rather than you in a retreating corner of your living room with an ever-growing Lego collection. No one's run with this. And if they have, tell me. If they have, tell me. Let me share it with you. Prime Minister's questions is what, Wednesday? 2 days before the Prime Minister stood in Parliament and declared that a judge-led inquiry into grooming gangs had been ruled out for reasons of speed and parallel criminal investigations. His own safeguarding minister was telling the public something else entirely different. So I'm going to have to blow my nose, so I want to do this. Sorry, excuse me. Sorry about that. So 2 days before, Keir Starmer stood in Parliament and declared that a judge-led inquiry was not possible. It'd been ruled out. His own safeguarding minister was telling the public something different entirely. On the 20th of October, so that's Monday, The Guardian reported, and I'll bring the Guardian article up so you can see it. It's this article. Starmer grooming gang inquiry left in turmoil after 2 survivors quit panels. There's a date there, Monday the 20th. The 20th of October 2025, The Guardian reported that survivors of child sexual exploitation had begun resigning from the government's advisory panel. They quit after discovering that the shortlist to chair the so-called national inquiry had been reduced to just 2 names. A police officer, who by the way has come after me, and I'll do something on him tomorrow, Jim Gamble, and a social worker who has quietly ran away like we knew she would. In response to the outrage, Jess Phillips, the safeguarding minister, issued a statement in The Guardian. Actually, what she did was The Guardian quoted an element of a letter that she'd sent to the Home Affairs Committee. Here we go. In a letter to the Home Affairs Select Committee, released on Monday night, the Safeguarding Minister Jess Phillips denied any cover-up, saying this could not be further from the truth. She added, "It is by no means exceptional for an inquiry to be announced a few months before a chair is appointed, with the UK COVID and infected blood inquiries both taking 7 months until a chair is appointed." Blah, blah, blah. All that is fine. This is the sentence I want you to listen to. "It has further been reported that no judicial candidates have been willing to take on the role. This too is categorically untrue." It has further been reported that no judicial candidates have been willing to take on the role. This too is categorically untrue. That's in a letter to the Home Affairs Committee published in the Guardian newspaper, the left-leaning Guardian newspaper. The message couldn't have been any clearer. Calm down. Judges had been considered. When someone's a candidate, that means there was an application process or a recruitment process where judges had been considered. 48 hours later, less maybe, depending what time this one, or less actually, the Prime Minister stood at the dispatch box and told the country the complete opposite. When questioned in the Commons about why survivors were walking out, the Prime Minister said, I'll just bring up his quote, "Can I answer that? It's a serious point, Mr. Speaker, because whether it should be judge-led was looked at by Louise Casey, and she decided against that for a reason. Her reasons were twofold. I'll spell them out. The first was the speed with which we could do this. The second is really important, and that is at the same time as the inquiry, I was absolutely determined that criminal investigations would go on at the same time. One of the problems that judge-led inquiries run into, I've seen and experienced this myself, is that they're often held back until the end of criminal investigations. And I was determined that we'd be able to run the two together. And it's because of that, Mr. Speaker." And then he goes on about reopening 1,200 historic cases. He's also, so put that contradiction to what Phillips said less than 48 hours earlier in a letter to the Home Affairs Committee, where she said judges had been judiciary and candidates. And the Prime Minister saying it had been ruled out. Put that to one side for a second. He's not saying he ruled it out. He's saying Baroness Louise Casey personally decided against a judge-led inquiry. Casey, you have a duty now. Or Badenoch or whoever from the Conservatives or wherever listens to this and then takes it off and passes it off as their own. I don't care. Have it. Baroness Casey now needs to be asked if she personally decided against a judge-led inquiry. Because if that was the case, that single line completely obliterates the line Jess Phillips had been pushing 2 days earlier on letter-headed paper to the Home Affairs Committee, and that is then published in The Guardian. There are two stories here. There can be only one truth. Jess Phillips, in that letter, and I'll bring it back up again so you can see it, please. I'll bring it back up again so you see the quote. That's her quote. "It has further been reported that no judicial candidates have been willing to take on the role. This too is categorically untrue." Jess Phillips is telling the public that judges were willing to take on the role and they'd ruled out the judges. And the best two candidates was the police officer who was a Labour Party member and a Labour Party activist. And a social worker from Lambeth, who was given Social Worker of the Year award in 2012 when Shabir Ahmed and his mates were being dragged through courts in a climate that demonstrated the entire failings of the profession. The Prime Minister told Parliament that a judge-led model had already been rejected. Jess Phillips, in a letter, claims that judges were willing to take on the role. Both statements cannot be true. Both statements cannot be true. If Phillips is right, then the Prime Minister misled Parliament. The Prime Minister lied. If Phillips is right, the Prime Minister lied. If the Prime Minister is right, Phillips lied in a letter to the Home Affairs Committee. Tell me I've got this wrong. The survivors who resigned weren't speculating. They had seen the shortlist. It contained just 2 people, a police officer and a social worker. Representatives of the very institutions accused of decades of failure and cover-up. A judge would have meant independence. And an inquiry, we hope, beyond, if not beyond political control, at least beyond the control of the frontline services that failed these young women. Their defence now is, well, they all failed, so they're all culpable, so it doesn't matter. No. Whether they withdrew, or whether they were quietly removed, or whether they were never asked in the first place, the result was the same. The inquiry was being shaped to protect the state, not expose it. Fiona Goddard, Ellie Reynolds, and all the others were right to quit. Jess Phillips' 20th of October statement. Judicial candidates have been willing to take on the role. Well, then why didn't they make the shortlist? And if they didn't make the shortlist, because these 2 are better, why did he approach them? Why were they considered in the first place? If the Prime Minister is saying Baroness Casey had ruled out. This lie of who is telling the truth and who is lying is all dependent on Baroness Casey being asked very, very specifically one simple question. Did you rule out a judge being appointed? It's a simple yes or no, because Starmer says she decided against a judge-led model. No. Because there is no public evidence, none that I can find, that Louise Casey ever made such a recommendation. Did Louise Casey said, I don't want a judge? A judge is the wrong person? That was beyond her remit. The Prime Minister's account stands alone, unsupported. And quantify it. Come on, Louise Casey, quantify it. If I was Kemi Badenoch, I'd be asking Louise Casey tomorrow. If I was GB News, who is listening to me here, or whoever else, from the Telegraph or the Times, I'd be asking Louise Casey tomorrow. Did you rule out a judge? And then if she says yes, I did rule out a judge, and it makes the Prime Minister right, then that's another reason why Jess Phillips should be sacked. Because she, at the very least, was misleading the Home Affairs Select Committee when she said, it has further been reported that no judicial candidates have been willing to take on the role. This too is categorically untrue. She didn't, did she? Survivors demanded a genuine judge-led inquiry because they've spent decades being failed by councils, police officers and politicians. They wanted independence. They've got this. It's like children telling lies and getting caught. Either the Prime Minister lied in Parliament or Jess Phillips lied in her letter to the Home Affairs Committee. If Phillips told the truth, the Prime Minister's statement about Louise Casey was false. If the Prime Minister told the truth, Phillips misled survivors when she claimed judges were still being considered. One of them lied. Possibly both, if you want my opinion. Possibly both. So there you have it. I think 2 explosive revelations, don't you? I claimed I could do it in an hour or half an hour. It took longer. And I want to end with this. It's not just who is lying. That's the question. Actually, that's a question. There's a greater question here. Why are they lying? Until that question is answered, no survivor and no member of the public can believe a single word that comes out of the mouths of any politician involved in this government when it comes to talking about the issue of justice. Because what is happening here is another betrayal. They were betrayed as children. They were betrayed when they spoke out. And now they are betrayed again, this time by a government that promised the truth but can't even agree on its own lies. For those of you who are new to me and who've persevered through the evening with me and persevered through the years with me, my name is Raj Amir. One time in my past, I was an expert in counter-extremism work, sat in rooms with prime ministers, world leaders, secretaries of state, and then I came back home to tend to my dying daughter and be a father to my daughter. And this landed in front of me. At the very least, share the work or take the content and be the difference that our nation needs every one of us to be. Because if we let this go, if we let them get away with this, my friends, there is no coming back for any of us.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them. On the 20th of November 2003, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011, he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know. Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.